We're nearly at the end of the day, and what I intend to do now is to just really quickly, this should only take 10 minutes or so, alert you to a bit of information about the thesis examination process. You're about to embark on this 3-year journey in which you're doing a single piece of work and completing a single project, and you can tend to think that that project is going to be what's called in what the English author George Eliot called the key to all mythologies, as if you're going to answer all the questions that have ever occurred to you and solve every problem that is confronting humanity. As it turns out, you're doing something quite specific, and you're doing it for quite a specific audience, and your aim is to meet the academic standards that the university defines as interpreted by 3 examiners reporting to a committee. And that is actually quite a specific process and a specific goal in which you have a very major role down the track. So just to help you with targeting where you're actually directing yourself over these next few years. Okay, so a little bit about the thesis examination process. Macquarie requires for a PhD examination that your thesis be sent to 3 examiners. If you're doing an MPhil, the small number of you will be doing an MPhil, it's sent to 2. The examination is undertaken purely by written report. Australia is unique amongst almost all the nations that operate the research training degrees, in that Australia does not require, as a rule, Australian universities do not require an oral examination or a thesis defence, or a viva, as it's called under different names around the world. So the burden is almost exclusively on the thesis examination reports produced by 3 examiners who have read a written document. Okay. Now that's changing, and I don't know whether it's going to change in Australia. 1 or 2 universities in Australia have already started to undertake oral examination. The first was the University of South Australia, and the next really big one that will do it is probably the University of Queensland. So over time that will probably become, which is one of the biggest universities in the country, so over time that will probably become a normal practice around Australia, but it's not practice here yet, and if it becomes one, it won't affect you. It will only be students in a future intake. Okay, all the examiners are external to the university, and that's also something that's unique in Australia. And Macquarie also requires that one of them be based in Australia and one of them be international at least. You know. And the reason that we have a domestic examiner is, as I've said, the Macquarie examination process, the Australian examination process is slightly different to examination processes around the world. So it's important that we have at least one examiner who really understands that process. And because we aim for all our research to be at world standard, that at least one of your examiners is also international. Now you can get exemption from that if it's appropriate. It is possible. If your work is exclusively on an Australian matter, as some people's work is, say it's on a very specific episode in Australian history about which almost nobody outside of Australia would be informed or aware or qualified to judge, then you can make a case to me, basically, that you have only a national examination panel. And equally, you can argue that there is nobody in Australia who's qualified to assess your work, so you could have an all-international panel. And there are some disciplines in which, for example, Macquarie is probably the only major player in Australia. Egyptology, for example, Macquarie is probably the only really major university working in the Egyptology area in Australia. It's very difficult for our Egyptology scholars to find Australian-based examiners, so often their panels are international. Okay, so about 3 months prior to submission, you should be starting to talk to your supervisor about who your examiners are going to be, but you should be thinking about them from the get-go. Who do you actually want to examine your thesis? Now, basically what that means is that in normal practice, almost all of the people who are nominated on your list to be your examiners in collaboration with your supervisor, almost all of those suggestions will come from you or will come from your supervisor. It's a discussion between the 2 of you. You're the experts in the area. You're probably the bigger expert in your area, so it's really up to you to identify. So what you need to look at is whose work are you reading, whose work do you respect, when you go to conferences, who's doing papers that are in your area that you think is a pretty well-informed person with some stature, who having as an examiner is really going to perhaps help you in your long-term career? Who do you think has all those qualifications but also is going to understand your research? So often people will send a thesis to someone who's an expert in their area but actually is on a completely different wavelength and is not going to get what they're trying to do. So it's important to find somebody who's really going to understand your work and somebody who might, that you'll learn from their feedback and benefit from their feedback, and also who might contribute to your career down the track. My first academic job after my thesis was actually, I got appointed to work with one of my thesis examiners who for some reason liked my PhD, and you know, that was a real breakthrough for me, so it can be of really material benefit. Okay, supervisors need to consult with you, but then the suggestion goes up the chain and actually comes to my office for final approval. So basically it needs to hit a whole lot of standards in order to be approved by the university. And this is again where you really need to acquaint yourself with the thesis preparation, submission, and examination policy, because certain people are ruled out as examiners. So anybody with whom you have done collaborative research in the past, anybody that your supervisor has done collaborative research with or published with in the last 5 years, these people are ruled out as conflicts of interest, so they cannot be your examiners. That's a national guideline. The Australian Council of Graduate Research actually identifies 44 possible conflicts of interest. They get through some really blindingly obvious ones, like you can't be married to your examiner, your supervisor can't be married to them, you can't be in a business relationship with them, you know, they can't be waiting for you to give them some money. All of these things rule them out. But the big ones, the big headline ones, are the ones that are actually cited in this policy. So do familiarize yourself with that. Okay, so a little bit about the process. This is the form that you need. All of this process is now run online. This is the form you need to fill out, the nomination of examiners process. And it takes you through all the different stages. Basically what you have to do, what happens with the nomination of examiners, is a long list is generated of 5 or 6 examiners, and out of that list 3 will be chosen to be your examiners. And you're not actually supposed to know who the short list is. You can know who the long list is, but you're not supposed to know exactly who those 3 are, because we do offer thesis examiners anonymity. If they so choose, they can have their name not reported to you as an examiner. Very few of them do, but some of them do. And so we have to give them that right. So that's the site that you'll be working through with your examiner. And then there's the thesis examination portal. Now, this portal is where you'll be submitting your thesis. The thesis examination process is electronic, so your thesis is submitted through this portal, and all the reports will go backwards and forwards through this portal. Probably by the time you're submitting, that original process, the nomination of examiners process, will be amalgamated with this as well. So it'll be a one-stop shop for the nomination of examiners, submission of the thesis, and all the subsequent processes that go on after that. And I'll explain a little bit about what those processes are in a minute. Before I do that, this is actually going back to the old analog version, because what's required on the website when examiners report is exactly the same as in the old paper-based one. But this is the form that examiners actually fill out. The examination report that a PhD examiner does is in 2 parts. Firstly, they fill out this form, which is 1 page, and secondly, they write a written report. The shortest written report we've ever got was 4 words long, which was not considered by the committee to be satisfactory, though it was accepted. But some reports are up to 20 or 30 pages long, so they really do go into a lot of detail in reading your thesis. But these are the questions that they're asked to answer, and they fit with the requirements of the Australian Qualifications Framework. So, in my judgment, this thesis makes a distinct contribution to knowledge in the area with which it deals. Okay, so a distinct contribution to knowledge. It has to be original, it has to be new. That's absolutely fundamental, and that's what they're asked. That's the big one. If you do a thesis, it has to meet that requirement. At PhD level, more than any other requirement, that's the core one. Affords evidence of originality shown either by the discovery of new facts or by the exercise of independent critical power. Equally important. Again, it's about working out exactly what contribution you're making, what's new about your work in the field. Okay? Now, your work will be new. There's almost no doubt about it. It will be, by the time you're working in a very specific, very esoteric area over a 3-year period, you're going to take your ideas into a really new space. So you don't have to worry about that now. That is not a huge hurdle to hide. That's what you'll be heading for, targeting as you undertake your research. It also has to be satisfactory as regards its literary presentation. Important for a number of reasons, but not a game breaker. Theses often will be passed when they're not deemed to be totally satisfactory for their literary presentation. But in a lot of theses where the examiner doesn't like the thesis and rejects it, they will do so because they are annoyed by the quality of the language. And they find it hard to follow. They find it carelessly proofread, poorly presented, ungrammatical, confusing to read. And they will have ticked the box saying that it's not satisfactory in its literary presentation, but that will spill over to their general impression of their argument, and they will be annoyed, sometimes insulted, and sometimes they write very angrily about it. So it is not a game breaker if it's not satisfactory in its literary presentation, but it's hugely influential on the impression that the whole thesis will give to the examiner, and just their general mode. If you're sending your examiner to a high-quality person, this is somebody who's very busy. They're going to be reading it maybe very quickly, maybe in 2 or 3 sittings. So what you've been working at over years, they will consume very quickly. And if it's hard for them to do that, if it's hard for them to understand what you're trying to say, or if it's sloppily done, if it's messy, the punctuation is all wrong, the grammar is all wrong, sentences don't make sense, they'll get annoyed. And that is not what you want them to do. You want them to love what you do. So you just have to be really careful about that. And the last ones are really advisory. It contains a substantial amount of material suitable for publication. That's more an advisory on its general quality, and it feeds into how original it is. If it's worthy of publication, that shows that it's a standard of originality and presentation that's required. And finally, they're asked whether they consider the thesis to be in the top 10 or top 5% of doctoral level research. And that's because the university has a policy that if all of the examiners tick that it's in the top 5%, then the Thesis Examination Subcommittee will consider giving it an award. Okay? And that almost never happens. Okay? So the committee, in its infinite generosity, will consider theses where 2 of the examiners have ticked the top 5%. In fact, every thesis where 2 examiners have ticked top 5%, it will be considered by the committee for an award, which is the Vice-Chancellor's Commendation for Excellence, which is a really valuable thing to have. I can tell you that's a really good thing to have. Okay, so that's the top part of that sheet. The bottom part of the sheet, though, is the real category that counts. They're asked to tick one of these boxes, and I won't go through all the wording, but the top 2 boxes are the ones that you want. And they're the ones that mean that the degree is already awarded, that they recommend the award of the degree. Okay, 95% of examiners' reports, they tick one of those top 2 boxes. In fact, about 90%, they tick the second box. So almost every candidate needs to make some corrections to their theses. And they can vary. The corrections can vary from as little as rewriting something so it's clear, relabeling a diagram. It can be read a few more articles and include some comments on them in your thesis. Can be reorder the chapters. So it can be quite major. But the examiner has said, you've already crossed the line, but I don't think it's quite finished yet. Can you do these things in order to make it complete before you lodge it in the library collection? Okay, that's what they're saying. And as I say, over 90% of candidates will have to do some corrections. They might take you a few hours, or they might take you up to a couple of months. But basically, you've crossed the line, you're there, you're going to get the degree. Now, about 5% of candidates will be given the 3rd category, which is revision and re-examination. And if any examiner, if one of the 3 examiners ticks that box, it goes to the committee. The committee has to decide whether you need to have another period of enrollment, do some more research, rewrite your thesis, and then submit it for examination all over again. Okay. Now, the committee will do that based on only one of the 3 examiners saying that if they think that examiner has identified issues that can't be overlooked, that are absolutely indispensable. If 2 or 3 of those examiners have ticked that, then you're very likely to be required to do that. But as I say, very few people, it's less than 5% of candidates will need to complete that. Once in a blue moon, an examiner in the first time around will tick the not award category. And basically what they're saying is, this thesis does not meet standards and it would be an absolute waste of time to give the candidate another go. Okay. That's a pretty harsh judgment, and the committee will almost never go with that. In fact, in the 7.5 years that I've been chairing the committee, I don't think it's ever gone with that judgment. And in fact, the committee's view is if somebody ticks that the first time around, that's pretty mean. You know, there's almost nobody who doesn't deserve a second chance. Okay. If it does go out for re-examination, in those small number of cases when it goes out for re-examination, the examiner is given this form again, but revision and re-examination is removed from the form. So they only have 3 options, which is award, award corrections, or not award. So you don't get a third go. So once it's gone out the second time, you have to either pass or it's not acceptable. Now, it's only happened a couple of times in the hundreds, if not thousands, of results that I've overseen in the committee. I think it's happened 3 times that it went to not award. Some people end up getting not award because they're given revise and re-examine and they decide to walk away and not complete. They're not going to do it again. Okay, that happens in a very small number of cases. People's personal circumstances, or they've just had enough. They can't face doing it again. Okay, but that's only happened once or twice. It's only happened, I think, 2 or 3 times that a person has gone through the process twice and got not award. So basically, the success rate for the PhD is getting up above 95%. You know, if you make it all the way and you submit and it's examined, the chances of you not getting the degree is very low, very, very low. And sometimes you only don't get it because you choose not to. Okay. The other thing to notice is, of course, this is a pass-fail process, so it's not involving a percentage score. It's you get the thesis or you don't. Okay, so it's meeting the standards or not meeting the standards. There's no quantitative evaluation like a percentage score or anything like that. Okay, so that's the core of the process. Okay, so what happens after submission? Basically what happens is the examiners are expected to return their reports between 6 weeks and 2 months. When that happens, when all the reports are in, they're sent to your supervisor, and the supervisor writes a commentary on the reports and a recommendation, and then sends the recommendation to the committee. If all of the examiners, and as I say, the overwhelming majority of them do, if all of the examiners have ticked award or award corrections, it's delegated to me. It just comes to me, and I sign them. I read the reports, the supervisor report, and then sign off on it, and then the whole process is done. And as I say, the overwhelming majority of you will be required to make some small changes to it to complete it. Okay, so, but basically I'm doing that on behalf of the Thesis Examination Committee. We have hundreds of theses every year. It's impossible for the committee to work through the paperwork, so the committee only in its meetings only really deals with, on the one hand, the examinations where one of the examiners asks for revise and re-examine, or the Vice-Chancellor's commendations. Those are the 2 things. And so when you're given corrections, you're allowed up to 2 months, and then there's a qualification for the Vice-Chancellor's commendation. Okay, so the other thing to be said is, unfortunately, this is an external examination process. Australian government requires an external examination process for research degrees, and basically we can be in the lap of the examiners. There are examiners who, the overwhelming majority of examiners are very committed and professional and return reports very quickly. A small number of them don't. And some of them do that because they don't return the reports because, well, in some cases they've died. In other cases, you know, there is some reason they're sick, something has happened to them, their circumstances make it impossible for them to work. Sometimes they're just slow and lazy, and we don't know that about them when we appoint them. And so we are a bit at the mercy of the examiners in in getting reports back, so sometimes there's a delay. But the focus of the office and of the committee is to get this process done as quickly as we can, because we know you're impatient to get on with your careers, and we're interested in advancing your careers as well. So we do try and do it as quickly as possible. It's very difficult to judge when an examiner comes back, should we just cancel that examination, appoint a further examiner, and then the clock has to start ticking again before you get a report? Or do we just keep waiting? Sometimes examiners keep promising, I'll give it to you tomorrow, I'll get it to you next week, and then it never shows up. You know, I mean, we've all got relationships with people like that. It's just, you know, it's impossible to guarantee what they're going to do. Okay, and now that's it for the day's proceedings, and what that leaves